The Far Quest, The Chronicles of Cursoon, Book 1, by R. Jason Lynch, copyright 2016, EMP 2023, all rights reserved. Chapter 15, A Chance to Escape. Cursoon gazed up the long, muddy passage, but he could see no way out, for the passage was not straight, but it turned this way and that, so that no light hinted at an exit. Moreover, he could not take the red-flamed torch to light his way because it was far too high for him to reach, and the wall was too muddy to climb, and any root he tried to pull himself up by only snapped when he put his weight upon it.
Broken strings.
He cursed, but this just made him miss his loot all the more. There was nothing for it but to feel his way along and hope that the trollop would not return while he was seeking an escape from her den. After taking a deep, shuddering breath, Cursoon started up the tunnel, blindly running his hands along the dirt wall as he went. When he had almost given up hope that the tunnel would ever end, the bard began to see light ahead of him, and as he turned the corner, he thought the sun was suddenly shining directly into his face. It was wonderful. Squinting his blue eyes, Cursoon came out of Baleful's den. Though the bog of Miremurk was full of shadows, to the bard it was now like a sun-soaked meadow, for his long stay in the blackness of the trollop's hole had made him temporarily sensitive to even the smallest amounts of light. He stood for a long moment waiting for them to adjust, but he quickly forgot the fading glare of the wood, for now he had a new difficulty.
Which way to the road?
Cursoon mused aloud, but before he could answer himself, a little man came from among the trees on the bard's right. He was hugging a bundle of sticks in his thin arms, and as he strolled past, he did not notice the bard standing just inside the yawning mouth of the trollop's den. He was truly a strange-looking man. In stature, he was less than 4 feet tall, and his legs and arms were thin and spindly. His torso, on the other hand, did not fit well with his gangly limbs, for his chest was short and thick. His aged face was thin with high cheekbones, and like an unchanging oak, he seemed to bear a permanent ill-tempered expression. A straggly beard of long gray hair hung from his chin and dangled down past his belt. He looked out from behind a pair of small oval-shaped spectacles, and their frames were made of smoothly carved wood. Their lenses were so thick that they made his eyes look huge, and thus it was easy to see that they were greenish hazel in color like the forest in late summer when autumn approaches. Upon his person he wore a greenish-gray jacket, and the ruffled cuffs of his tan-colored shirt peeked out from its sleeves. Wine-colored trousers came down just past his knees, and on his feet he wore loose, pale gray stockings. Over these he marched dutifully in a pair of old leather shoes with ornate wooden buckles. The toes of these shoes turned upward and tapered to curled points. His head was covered by a pointed wine-red biggin, a hood-like cap that was often worn by commoners. The corners of this cap hung down so that they covered most of his large ears, and from these flap-like sides, 2 untied straps dangled. Still not noticing Cursoon, the small man wordlessly turned his back to the bard. He was just about to place his armload of sticks under a pile of gray logs when Cursoon suddenly recognized him.
Mr. Tippleglee?
The bard cried with total amazement. He was overjoyed to find someone other than the trollop, and what's more, someone he actually knew. The small man almost jumped out of his skin, and in doing so, he flung the bundle of sticks, scattering them all around himself.
Whatever are you doing here?
Cursoon asked with unrestrained joy. He was far too happy to notice the fright he had given his old acquaintance. He threw his arms around Tippleglee, giving him a hearty embrace.
Hammers and pegs!
The little man cursed while quickly shoving the bard away.
How do I know you, man?
It is I, Cursoon,
the bard replied.
When I was a boy, my father and I were your lord's guests in the castle of Blackthorn. Don't you remember?
Tippleglee eyed him skeptically, and then growled with little enthusiasm.
You've grown.
The bard laughed, and then asked his question again, seeing that the man must not have heard it the first time.
But what are you doing here in such a vile place?
llElevenLabs glanced at the curious expression upon the younger man's face, and then grumbled his answer.
After Beset died, I returned here, but then Baleful caught me.
You returned here?
llElevenLabs echoed with a confused expression.
Why here?
Without answering, the little old man bent down and began gathering the kindling he had dropped. It was obvious that he did not wish to explain any further.
And you've been here ever since?
llElevenLabs pressed as he began to help llElevenLabs pick up his sticks.
Aye, lad.
The odd little man replied while rolling his magnified eyes. The bard continued helping, but after a moment of silent toil, he came to his senses.
Wait! What are we doing? Come on! Help me find my way out of this filthy bog so we can escape together.
If it's that easy, don't you think I'd done it myself already?
llElevenLabs answered as a bewildered look passed over his normally sour face, but this was soon replaced by an angry glare.
Anyway, you're the one with all the swords,
he argued while pointing to llElevenLabs' belt.
Why not wield one and save yourself and me also?
A look of anguish overshadowed the bard's face as he touched the four-leaved shamrock on the pommel of his family's heirloom, but did not take it from its scabbard.
I'm unworthy to wield my grandfather's sword, and anyway, when I struck her before, it had no effect at all.
You struck her?
llElevenLabs gasped.
On her nose.
llElevenLabs confirmed with a depressed sigh. The little man scoffed.
You're more the fool than I supposed. Hammer and pegs. I'm surprised she hasn't murdered you yet.
Shaking his head with disbelief, llElevenLabs took off his wooden spectacles and wiped sweat from his long nose. With his glasses removed, the true size of his eyes could be seen, and they were very small and squinty.
Wood shavings,
the little man cursed.
Worthy? What is worthiness when your freedom beckons? And her surely going to crush you when the fancy strikes her.
llElevenLabs started to answer with a downcast gaze, but the giantess suddenly returned with a large rusty iron cauldron in her arms.
Ah, good,
Baleful growled.
You've met my lil pet, Grumbles.
Grumbles?
The bard echoed, shooting a puzzled look at llElevenLabs. The trollop guessed his question.
That's what I call him. He's wiser than yours. Wouldn't never give his right name.
With an evil chuckle, Baleful stooped down and plunged the rusty vessel into the stagnant pool that lay just outside her den. When the cauldron was mostly full, she lifted it out of the putrid water with a groan and set it upon a pile of gray logs. Having done all this, the trollop stomped away again. When she was gone, llElevenLabs went over and started building a fire under the great iron cauldron. As he worked, he asked,
Why, in Riven, did you tell her your full name, lad?
Shrugging, llElevenLabs sighed.
I don't know. It just came out.
The little old man rolled his eyes, took the kindling he had gathered for the second time, and stuffed it under the pile of firewood.
Well,
he grumbled as he produced a small wooden box from his pocket.
Leastwise you didn't rattle off where you and your family live.
llElevenLabs shifted uncomfortably.
You didn't.
llElevenLabs balked. The bard slumped down upon a log.
I didn't. Not exactly. I was talking to Guileless and, well, how was I supposed to know she was spying on us?
The little man grew angry.
And how do you suppose you'd be escaping her then? She, knowing where you live. Believe you me, she has a knack for ruining castles. Do you want your fathers to be next?
To emphasize his irritation, llElevenLabs set his wooden box down on a stump with a heavy thud. Opening the box, he took out some fine wood shavings for tinder. Still grumbling to himself, he brought out a small, strange contraption made of wood. Kurasoon had never seen anything like it before. It consisted of a wooden wheel with a small crank. The wheel was fastened to a block of willow. The little old man took the tinder and placed it in a small depression on the piece of willow, and then he began to crank the wheel. It spun rapidly against the block, and soon the friction it made produced a wisp of smoke. Tippleglee blew on the tinder, and seconds later a small flame sprang to life. After placing the tinder under the kindling, only a few more minutes passed until the bright amber glow of a fire crackled under the pot.
What was that?
Kurasoon asked with a curious look.
I call it a friction wheel,
The little old man muttered stiffly.
Did you invent that?
The bard asked with a note of surprise. Tippleglee sighed but gave no answer.